Greetings. How is everybody today? I always ask that like you're going to answer me. So I'm believing that you are answering me in your vehicle or your I've heard some really interesting things that people are doing while they are listening to this podcast. I think the most unusual was somebody was getting what do you call it with the needles? What is that? Acupuncture.
Mm.
They were getting acupunctured. I'm not sure if my podcast lends itself to relaxation, but hey, go for it. Uh, I have a wonderful guest today. My name is Lisa Edwards, and you are listening to the Exclusive Career Podcast. And we're going to be talking today about relationship building with my guest today, Brad Englert. And I thought a lot about this, Brad, after we talked, because I sort of introduced it and sort of was thinking along the lines of networking. So what I came to the conclusion, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this, is that this is kind of under the umbrella of networking. That networking is this all-encompassing thing that we do for a variety of reasons. And one of those reasons that we network is to build really critical relationships both within our organization and outside for the business of our business. Does
Hmm.
that seem fair?
Sure, that's right.
All right. Well, go ahead and tell them about yourself. Tell them what you want them to know, and then let's dig into this topic.
Well, I was with Accenture for 22 years, 10 years as a partner. My focus area was higher education, so my clients were The Ohio State University, Michigan, Illinois, Vanderbilt, Columbia, Cal State, and even Texas A&M. So, um, had a lot of fun doing that. Happily retired, and then the University of Texas called, where I got my graduate degree, and they needed an IT strategy. So they asked me to help since I knew higher ed, and I was an hour a week pro bono, so they're too cheap to pay for my dry cleaning or my parking. And that was in October. By March, I was half-time. By June, full-time. And I was there for 8 years, seven as the chief information officer.
And we were just commenting on you having on your Longhorns shirt as we speak. I am a faithful Seminole. You guys know that if you've listened to this podcast for very long, but I don't wear the podcast. I don't wear that on the podcast, but if I could, if I felt like I could, I would. I don't have a nice collared shirt like you do, Brad. So we're going to talk today about building internal and external relationships. So why is that such an important topic, not only for you as the person that's doing the building, but also for the people that you are building these relationships with?
Well, I wanted to separate this discussion from traditional networking, which tends to be transactional and superficial, and people showing up once every 20 years when they need a job. Um, that's not building an authentic business relationship. And I've
No.
been to networking events for 40 years and have earned zero customers out of those interactions. So, I had one person send me an email afterwards asking me to donate to their not-for-profit. It's like, I don't even know you. Why would I do that?
Yeah, I
So,
think yeah, that for the most part that's gone, or at least among women, because I'm in a lot of women organizations and work with a lot of women, is we are changing the face of that to be more meaningful and deep, because you are absolutely right. That transactional, here's what I want you to do for me, and then I don't want to talk
mhm,
to you again for 20 years. That
yeah,
does not work, and it gets you a really bad rep in the workplace.
that's right. So my focus is, who are your business relationships? And there's some closest to you, your boss, your direct reports, executive leaders, and all your staff. And often you'll meet with your boss once a week, your direct reports once a week, executive leaders, not quite as often, but you may be called upon to help them, and you need to be ready for that. And then, what do you communicate to your staff? Um, External relationships are your customers, peers and influencers, and strategic vendor partners. And it's not that you have to build 100 relationships, it's being strategic and intentional of who you build these relationships. Where do you invest your time? And with your boss, it seems obvious. Direct reports, obvious. But customers, you need to prioritize who are your best customers, your biggest customers. I'm of the philosophy customers are not always right. Some customers you don't want to work with, and
You
they
need to
need to be
fire your
fired.
customer. Yes,
Exactly.
absolutely. I fired a few.
Yeah, and life's too short. And then same thing with peers and influencers. And being in a university environment, I was responsible for central IT. Well, I needed to reach out and build relationships with the VP for public safety. It wasn't a matter of if something go wrong, but when it goes wrong, and how do our teams work together. And
Hmm.
he actually went to the Ohio State University, so we just bonded immediately. So it was my best client. And we prepared for uh, ice storms, cybersecurity attacks, bomb scares, power going out, and we would do tabletop exercises with both teams. And sure enough, we had the power go out, but we were ready. We knew how to deal with that,
Hmm.
meaning we had copper phone lines in the emergency management center because when you don't have power, you don't have a network. So you need to be able to have the backup capability. We also had a standing operating procedure. What would happen if we couldn't anticipate something? So one day we had a bomb scare, and I'm out on the mall with just my phone. I don't have my computer. I don't have anything, but the operating procedure was hop on a conference call with his team, my team, and connected to the executive leadership team. And we worked the bomb scare from the mall.
And I can see, I'm thinking of the Brene Brown calls it sort of putting, I think, pennies in the jar in terms of relationship building. I've always thought of it as that emotional bank account and having
Right.
a healthy balance in that bank account. If you
That's
had
right.
no relationship with the director of public safety, not a negative one, but just you hadn't bothered, neither of you had made an effort, you
Right.
could identify each other in a lineup, right? But other than
Hmm.
that, you're starting from, it feels like if it's the yellow brick road, you're starting from square one,
Hmm.
whereas the relationship that you built and the not only just the systems that you put in place, but the relationship meant you were several paces along that yellow brick road when the need hit. And also if you had to call on him or vice versa for a favor, whatever that looks like,
Right. Right.
something that would be time consuming or whatever, you are much more likely to get that if that emotional bank account has a healthy balance in it.
That's
Fair?
right. That's absolutely correct. And I had a customer who I would meet. We're implementing a large financial system, and I would meet with the executive director once a month, like clockwork, to talk about where we're headed, how things are going, any issues. And about 9 months into it, 1 month before go live, we were falling behind. And I said, Jim, I need some help here. I can bring some more resources. And he just spun around, hopped on the phone, called his project manager, and said, what do you need? You got it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I just showed up 9 months later without having talked to him, then I'm showing up with a big problem. And there is no emotional bank account.
Exactly. And we all know people in our professional lives who when they darken our door, it's never good news. And so we don't want to see those people even if we need to see them. We
Hmm.
don't want to because we know they are the bearers of bad, they are the grim reaper at our door. And so it seems to be like if you can show up and darken the door when things are good or neutral,
Hmm.
then you don't get that immediate like please don't, I don't want to hear it. Like I don't want to
Well,
know
when
what
I
you're
got
coming
when I
for.
got to the university, I met with this professor who I'd known 15 years earlier, electrical engineer, crusty old guy. He'd been there for 40 years, and we worked on a statewide network that was very successful. And I said, okay, give me some advice. He goes, get out of the office and tell people you give a damn. And that was the best advice because you're not going to learn what your customers need or your peers need if you're hiding in your office and hiding behind a screen. And I asked my direct reports to do the same. So I and my direct reports each had 7 to 10 peer relationships across the campus 7 direct reports. So we had this network of relationships that was almost like our nervous system. We could get feedback. We would share big initiatives that are coming. We
Hmm.
changed the learning management system. We changed all the phones to voice over IP. We basically irritated everybody once a year with something. And new HR payroll system. And we would also get my public safety peer would call with rumors. Brad, I heard a rumor that you don't have enough diesel in the generators at the data center. I said, that's a good rumor. Let me check. And turned out that we top it up every month. We clean them out once a year. And another generator for the network runs on natural gas. So good rumor, just not true. And I was able
Yeah.
to nip that in
Yeah.
the bud because he felt comfortable picking up the phone and calling.
So a part of this, if we step back from the interpersonal nature of it, this relationship building is a very effective way to create for your office an environment of inclusivity. Like, we want to hear from you. We're going to be in your space periodically. I'm thinking along, and it sounds like it's kind of what you did when I was running the last career center at Truman State University. We all had departments that we managed. So whether the
Mm-hmm.
students were coming to us and they were a philosophy major, there was a point person for them. And that same point person was the one who would go and speak to department head meetings, let them know what we were doing, communicate with
Mm-hmm.
them on an ongoing basis. And so they
Yeah.
had, beyond just sort of the nameless, faceless career center or me as the director, they had a
Mm.
specific person. And I think that's a very effective tool for departments who are providing services to internal customers.
I agree. Mm.
So you talk about a term, sphere of influence, which is a term that I use frequently with my clients, and juxtaposing what you have control over versus your circle of concern over which you have no concern, no influence. So how do you and why do you use the term sphere of influence?
Well, it's those relationships where you have the ability to actually get out there and build the relationship. And as I said in the beginning, you need to be strategic and intentional. So you don't have to meet with all your vendors, where are you spending millions of dollars a year? Meet with the top vendors and have them help you and turn it into a partnership, not a transactional relationship. So my learning management vendor was a legacy 1990s technology. The students hated it. They thought it was clunky. The VP for curriculum desperately wanted a new learning management system. So her team and mine worked together, and the faculty and students actually picked a new learning management system, which was user friendly, uh, latest technology in the cloud so it could scale. And it took us 2 years to transition. Well, the senior vice president of the new company called me once a month just to see how we were doing. We were that important to
Because you'd
him.
spent at least $1,000 with that company, I'm sure.
And he knew if we were successful, that all the other big research one universities would follow, which this was 10 years ago. So that's exactly what happened. And I still stay in touch with the senior VP for market. He's at another company now, but
But you
we
have that
still,
relationship.
yeah.
Yeah.
And now back to the legacy vendor, he would show up, the account rep, once a year, just looking for his check. And it
Mm-hmm.
was always 10% more than the prior year. When we had problems, unresponsive, their tech support was erratic. And after 2 years, I was so happy to fire that vendor. And he didn't even hear the bullet coming. He was so clueless. I mean, here we are, a huge 54,000 students, 4,000 faculty, transitioning over 2 years, and you don't know it. that's that's how
It's
little he
that
cared.
is that is there's such a nugget there for everyone, regardless of where you work, what kind of work you do, what industry you're in. But this guy had a 2 year runway beyond the fact that he was providing poor service and should have had a clue before the 2 years. but you were actively implementing a different system for 2 years. And by the way, those of you who don't know what an LMS is at a university, it is runs everything. It's where all the courses, all the students, the grades, the students go in there to put their projects in. I worked with the system, the legacy system that Brad speaks of. It was clunky and nobody liked it. So I don't know what that university is using now, but it is a huge, huge piece of the technology infrastructure of a university. Fair to say?
Well, well, at the end of the 2 years, the department liaisons throughout the university sent an email to the president copying me and the vice provost for curriculum, and I just covered my eyes. It's like, oh, we're gonna get fired over this one because what could possibly go wrong? And the email was the most complimentary email of how both our teams worked together to help the entire university transition. And the vice provost, of course, had a team that helps with teaching and learning in the classroom. I was helping on the back end and getting changes to the solution. But it was together. They said something like, "You helped us with humility, and you cared, and you even had some humor along the way." And so we had a
Oh,
big
important ingredient.
exactly.
Very
We had a
important.
big celebration, pizza party at the bowling alley, in the student union. And I had a sheet cake made in the shape of a tombstone. And I put the name of the old vendor on there and put rest in peace. And we all celebrated.
I hope you had the foresight to use black icing.
I did.
An insider joke there. All right, I think you have three ingredients for us to build these relationships. What are they? Why do you consider them to be so important?
Well, when I finished the manuscript, I actually stepped back and said, well, what's common with all these business relationships? And number one was understanding people's goals and aspirations. What are they trying to achieve? And then ask yourself, how can you help them? If you can help them, set and manage expectations. And I was pretty bad at that early in my career. I tended to say yes to everything. I learned later to manage those
Mm-hmm.
expectations, and it's which is a continual process. And then third, genuinely care about their success. If you ask people what they need, you set and manage expectations if you can help them, and you genuinely care in all your business relationships, then it becomes authentic. Authentic by
Mm-hmm.
meaning trusting and enduring and mutually beneficial.
I like that. And I can see where managing expectations is such a huge piece, especially in the IT world. I know I've worked with a client recently who was kind of in the business of, yes, okay, that scope creep, yes, that's great. Okay, no problem. And so we worked out some language around kind of negotiating with those clients to say, okay, we can either meet your increased scope and here's
Mm,
how long it will take, or here's what I can do within the time limit that you've given us.
that's right.
But we can't do both because you're setting yourself up either for failure or burnout if
That's
you
right. Well,
um
I had a partner boss who was a type A personality and everything was urgent, urgent. And one night I
yes.
was trying to leave to have dinner with my wife, and literally 5 o'clock the phone rings and it's her. Brad, I need a white paper, a white paper. And I was a little nervous, but I said, whoa. I didn't say no. I said, whoa. And it's Texas, so I can say whoa. And and I said, when do you need this white paper? Oh, let me check my calendar. I meet with the client in 2 weeks. Okay. How many pages do you want this white paper to be? Oh, 3 pages. I was thinking 10. Do you have an example of a white paper that I could? Yeah, yes, David. I did one 10 years ago, blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what? I went home and had dinner with my wife. Now, before I learned to say whoa, I would have called her and canceled dinner,
Right.
upsetting her and me. I would have stayed up all night and the next day delivered a 10-page paper and get yelled at. But
Yep.
instead of saying yes and just blindly chasing into the dark tunnel. I actually created some space and time to understand what the expectations were. After that, I never missed a vacation. I never missed training. I never missed a school play. I never missed a doctor's appointment because I learned how to do that with my customers as well.
I think that's another great nugget, Brad. You've got so many of them. That's a great one for folks who find that their family life, their personal life, their health, their fitness goals, their well-being, as far as, food intake, all of those things their sleep begin to suffer when they don't learn how to say, whoa, get clarification. And also, I always say, like, learn how to put your tongue on the top of your mouth to form the word no. Because
Yeah,
sometimes whoa then turns out to be some form of no. There has to be some
right.
no in there. Not always, but sometimes it does. You mentioned a manuscript. I want to step back to that one. Is that the book that we're seeing behind you?
Mm.
Spheres of
Spheres of
Influence?
influence, how to
Excellent.
create and nurture authentic business relationships.
And I believe we're going to have a link to that in the show notes, correct?
That's right.
Excellent. So everybody can to check that out. All right. So we've talked a lot about building relationships, why they're so important. My listeners love the takeaways and the practical application of all of this. So what are 3 to 5 action steps that you want to leave them with so that they can get out there and from whatever point they're at currently, begin
Hmm.
to build mutually beneficial relationships?
Well, the first thing I would ask everyone to do is just evaluate their current business relationships and ask yourself, how can I improve my relationship with my boss or my direct reports or my customers? And then be strategic and intentional because you don't have to meet with all your customers, but who are the most important customers? At Accenture, 80 to 90% of our customers are repeat customers. Well, why is that? Because we have a history of success and people trust you to be
Mm-hmm.
successful again. And it's much more expensive to sell to a new customer than an
Yeah.
existing customer. So, just making that in understanding where you should focus your time. And then the second thing is all you have to do is put it on your calendar. Your boss once a week, your
Yes.
direct reports once a week. I would always meet in their offices so their teams could see me coming to their boss and I'd walk through the workspace and say hi and, see
Mm-hmm.
how people were doing. And same thing with my customers. I would always meet in their offices and it gives me an opportunity to get across campus and bump into people and call it management by stumbling around. But just put it on the calendar. It doesn't, it's not that hard. And then it pops up the next month. Send the agenda prior to the um, checkpoint saying, here's what I want to talk about. What would you like to talk about? And then you follow up with the discussion. And so my direct, IT people aren't known as being touchy-feely. Um,
No.
so I had to ask my direct reports to do that. Just put it on your calendar and get out there. And one of my engineers said, what was important is he had to know everything we were working on, not just what his domain was. He had to know that we were implementing a learning management system, just as the other directors needed to know we're changing all the phones to voice over IP, which was his responsibility. And so the entire management team knew what the priorities were, and we were able to speak to those to their customers.
Yes, I love that. Um, there's again so many nuggets so many nuggets in there for you to think about. And it's not that we're saying that you have customers that you can ignore. It's simply creating, I guess, kind of a hierarchy
That's right.
of importance there. And I think if nothing else, remember Brad's story about that company that let that account go by for two
Hmm.
years plus while you transitioned to a new learning management system and did nothing about that. And I want to reiterate the calendaring thing. And I want to take it a step further because what I find is when I have something on my calendar, so for example, blocks of time where I'm doing nothing but getting into LinkedIn and responding to messages, making comments on people's posts. This is separate from the posts that I do. My
Mhm.
brain, when I started this process, my brain wanted to say, you have a project that's due. You've got a client whose project is due today. Why are you spending your time on, roaming around LinkedIn? My brain wanted to think it was a waste of time. And I found that I could tell my brain, no, this is how I structured this period of time
Mhm.
specifically to spend it on LinkedIn. And then now, many years later, my brain doesn't argue with me about that anymore. So having that on my calendar, because
Yep.
now I'm using my executive function of my brain, I've decided ahead of time, put it on my calendar, and now I'm going to have my own back. I'm going to back myself up in the commitment to spend that time the way that I
Yeah.
said.
And it's
Uh,
so easy to get caught up in the day to day and the minutia and the transactional, and you had incoming all the time. So it's easy for that once a month to become, oh, it's been three
yep.
months. Oh, it's been
Yep.
6 months. And then you're the one showing up with a problem after 9 months without
Exactly.
building the emotional bank account.
I've got a client right now. In fact, she's in IT and
Mm.
she has quite a bit of coaching with me, and we're working primarily on her. If you know Steve Covey at all, Stephen Covey, he talks about quadrant two activities. So those
Yeah.
important but not urgent, and that's where the real work gets done. That
Hmm.
planning, looking to the future, that kind of thing. And she found herself. She's setting up a new PMO and she found herself just putting out fires. The last time I talked to her, I was her 12th meeting of the day. So
Oh.
everything we've worked on has been about time management, structuring her time,
Hmm.
and freeing up her time for those quadrant two activities. And when I said to her last session, and she told me I was her 12th, and actually I was her 11th meeting, but then a 12th meeting popped up, and we were meeting after my after hours. She's a little bit
Hmm.
farther west than me, but it was late in the day, and she just got popped up with another meeting. And I said to her, what would it be like if, after all of the things we've talked about you doing, if you were able to free up 5 hours a day where you didn't have to be in meetings and you could
Hmm.
do quadrant two? You should have seen the look on her face. It was like an angelic, like
Yeah.
the heavens had opened up and shined down on her, the mere thought of that. So
Hmm.
when you can do that planning, whether it's about these relationship buildings, but also all of the strategic work that you have to do in your business, the things that take foresight and planning where you're not in reaction mode, where you're not um, like sweating out cortisol
Well,
because
and
you're in stress mode.
it's a cultural issue too.
Oh,
I
yes.
inherited the central IT group, 330 people, $40 million budget, and it was a fire drill culture. And they rewarded heroics. And I needed to change it to a proactive customer service culture. And the first thing we did was articulate the values that we as an organization uh, deemed important. And number one was family first. Well,
Mm,
why is that? I'm in Austin, Texas. All the multinational tech companies are here. I cannot compete on wages, but I can compete on an 8 hour day. Number two,
yes.
collaboration with our customers. Number three, trust. There was some bad behavior in the past where we weren't trustworthy. And three of my seven directors self-ejected. They couldn't make the transition, and I was able to bring in professionals who really understood proactive customer service. And I wrote a blog once a month. I'm sorry, once a week for 8 years, talking about the values of the organization, uh, saying that we don't, if you're sick, stay home, don't be a hero. If you need to go to the school play, go to the school play. We have 330 people to back you up. And it took about 7, 8, 9 months, but we finally turned the corner and, you know, the entire organization really saw the value in being proactive customer service, not just wait till things break and then swoop in with heroics.
Yeah. It's the same thing as like, do you want to get stranded on the side of the road with your vehicle, or would you rather, when the light goes off on the dashboard or when you get the notice from the dealership saying it's time for an oil change, like,
Exactly.
let's go ahead and take care of it.
Yeah.
Everything in our home needs regular maintenance
Hmm.
from the air conditioning to the toilets. But yet we think sometimes we're in that fire drill mentality. If it's not burning, don't
Yeah.
don't worry with that building that's right next to the one that's burning because we've got to deal with the one that is burning.
Well, I
It's
had a woman who was a direct report who read the manuscript, said, Brad, my story's not in there. I said, what story? And she goes, the one where you ordered me to go meet with the manager on campus who hated us. I said, oh, yeah, that story. I said, I'd rather have the manager in the tent with us than outside the tent throwing rocks at us. And she went out and met with this person, started with apologizing for bad behavior on
right.
our part. I did the same with that manager's boss, the department chair. I said, I apologize. That's not how we're going to work going forward. Well, after 7, 8 months, that manager became an advocate for us.
Hmm.
And so that wouldn't have happened if my direct report hid in her office and hid behind a screen.
Yep. Well, this has been fantastic. I love the conversation and the importance of building these relationships. How can people find you, and what are we putting in the show notes for them to grab from you?
I have a link to my website, which will have a tab for a free sample of the book, a tab in how to buy the book, and a tab to how to schedule time on my calendar. And of course, I'm on LinkedIn.
Excellent. Well, that'll all be in the show notes. And Brad, I can't thank you enough for being on the podcast today.
Thank you.
All right, guys, I hope this has been helpful. I hope it's given you some food for thought on a couple of levels, one of which is the importance of doing this. And then, secondly, hopefully, it's gotten the wheels turning for you about how you might get this started from, again, whatever spot you're at. If this has been a non-priority at all for you, okay, we're starting from the beginning. What are the baby steps you can take? If you already think you're doing pretty well with this, think about, don't let yourself off the hook. Think about what's that next level? How can I take it to the next better version? And I will see you next time. Take care.